Okay, so we're going to be working in After Effects again today, and hopefully it's going to go a lot smoother. I'm basically going to do the demo that I did yesterday, but with a few additions, controlling the video and everything. So the goal is I want you to watch through this video and possibly pause it and do these steps on your own. And obviously in this assignment, I have the sample files for you to work on. I have some new sample files. They're very similar to the ones from yesterday, but we're going to try something different with it. But what I would really like for you to do with this particular project is to use your own files. For example, the file that I'm going to give you today, I just shot on my phone. And so if you have a file on your phone that you want to use or something like that, that would be great. Or if you have your own logo or anything. So basically, at the end of all this, I just want to have a file that looks like what I'm showing you, but you can either use my files or you can use your own, as long as we have a movie at the end. So a very short one. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. And I am going to start recording. So again, here we are in After Effects. I'm not going to go through everything because you guys know where things are. But again, we're going to import, and you can either come in here and you can go File, Import, and you can import multiple files, or you can drag and drop. Now, I'm not going to worry about making folders first. So I'm going to drop in my video, and then I'm going to drop in my logo. So if I wanted to, I could make a folder after the fact and then move my video into it. And I can make another folder and I can call it logo and move that into there. So now that I've got my two files inside, what I want to do is go ahead and make a new composition. So I'm going to do that. And again, I'm going to use my HD TV thing. 1920 by 1080. That'll be fine for now. One thing that I didn't mention before is you could change the background color. Now the default in this case is black. I'm going to change the background color to white, and there's a reason why, and you'll see it in a second. So I'm going to say OK. And the name of this composition is going to be Munden Point. So this is another one of our parks. So here in Virginia Beach. So I'm going to start off with that and say OK. So now that I've got this, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and drop in the video. And I want you to notice that because I shot it recently on my iPhone 11 Pro or whatever, it is the right aspect ratio. It's the right aspect ratio for this document, that the whatever 1920 by 1080, and it fits well. So now I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the sound, and I'm just going to hit the sound icon right here. But what I'm going to do is something different that I didn't do yesterday. And so again, I'm going to click on the little caret here on the side, the little arrow point, and I'm going to open up my transform. And I am going to adjust the opacity, because what I wanted to do is I wanted to come in from like nothing into the image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click, I'm here in frame 1, I'm going to click on the opacity stopwatch, and that gives me a keyframe. And I'm going to move in, and this is telling me this is a 9-second video, so it's a little longer than yesterday. So I really want to come in at about half a second before before it's visible. So I'm going to stop my playhead right about there, and I'm going to hit the diamond next to opacity, and I'm going to put that in. And so I'm going to come here, and I do want it to fade out at the end as well. So I'm going to come to the end of my video, and I'm going to hit the little diamond, and then I'm going to come in about half a second, and I'm going to hit the diamond. Now that I've done that, I can just go ahead and double click on each diamond and change the opacity. So that is going to be at 0%. This one is, and I can see by looking over here, at 100%. this, whoops, I didn't mean to move it. This one is at 100%, and I'm going to double click the end here, and I'm going to make it back down to 0. So let's take a look. I'm just going to hit play, or the space bar rather. I'm going to move this over, and this is what we got. So now I've got a fade in, and I pan over that way. So that's cool. And now I've got enough time to do something there, and then it fades out. So that is great. And as far as I'm concerned, that layer is done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the lock symbol so that I don't mess it up anymore. And I'm going to click on that caret and collapse everything. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to start right about here, and I'm going to place my logo. And now you can see that my video is about 9 seconds, but my logo came in again at like 30 seconds. So all I have to do is, boom, trim it to that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some type, and I'm just going to click and drag a box, and I'm going to type in Virginia Beach. Now, I already had the type set over here. You can see at Helvetica New Thin, the color is white, the size is 114. One thing that I do want to do is I want to make it centered. So I'm going to highlight it, then go to the paragraph tab and center it. Also, one of the cool things is if I go back to character, I can adjust the spacing between letters. Like right now it's at 200. I'm going to go to 300, and then I'm going to grab my selection tool, and I'm going to move it down a little bit. Now, one thing that's really interesting is I had my caps lock on, right, when I was typing. And so when the caps lock is on, it's going to disable your refresh, or, for your view. So for example, when I move this type and I let go, it's going to be blank because my caps lock is on. And if you look down here, you'll get, and After Effects will give you these little triangles, little warning signs. And it says here that the refresh has been disabled. Release caps lock to refresh view. So now it's there. Now the reason why I did these two things is even if this was like, say, over here, I can use my shift key, the text is selected, and my logo is selected, and I can come over here to the panels, and I can go to align, and I can align it to the selection, or if I wanted to, I could align them both to the composition, which would still put it, well, let's take a look at it. And align to the composition. So now it's in the dead center of the composition. So what I want to do is I want to scale this down. And I'm going to hold down my shift key. The problem is it's not scaling them as a group because it's seeing it as two separate items that have their registration points in different places. Totally fine, doesn't matter. I just know that it's going to be scaled together. I'm going to move this up here, and I'm going to move this over here. And once again, I'm going to align them, but remember, I'm not going to align it to the composition because that'll put it in the center. So I'm going to hit selection, and then I'm going to center them together. So that's all set. Now we could merge these things together into a composition like group, but we're not going to get into that yet. So I'm going to just go do it the old-fashioned way so that you guys can see how we're doing. So I'm going to take this, and I do have to shrink up the type, and it's actually doing both. So I'm going to have to click off of it and then shrink up the type on the timeline to where it fits. And now what I'm going to do is on each of these, I'll go ahead and open them, and I'm going to transform. I'm going to click on the opacity, and then I'm going to move it to here. And I'm going a little past 1 second. So what I want is I want the video to render and be like 100%. And then just a fraction of a second later, I want the Go Virginia Beach to be 100%. So I'm moving that there. And again, I'm going to go ahead and hit the little diamond, and now I've got those. So I can come back to this original one, the first one, and I can make the opacity 0. I can double click on this one and make the opacity 0. And so if I move my playhead back here, this is what we're going to have. Okay, so now we got Go Virginia Beach and all that stuff. So that's pretty easy. That works exactly the way I want it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add an additional element. And this will be the type that says Munden Point Park. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my text tool. And I'm going to go ahead and collapse these carets just so that it stays relatively straight, less cluttered. And I'm going to click and drag and type in Munden Point Park. Now, I don't want to use that same type that I use for Virginia Beach. So I'm going to select it, Command A, select all, or if I wanted to, I could just click, double click, and then drag, just like any other text. And I'm going to come in here, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set my 300 spacing back to 0, and then I'm going to change my font. And I don't think I have a lot of fonts here. I think I used Hopper before. So I'm also going to increase the size. I'm going to go ahead and come in here, and I'm going to type in 200. Now, again, what's really cool is now I'm going to use a little bit of motion, and then I'm going to use a little bit of the opacity. So I'm going to drag this over here, and on this frame, it's going to be off the page, right? I think I'll have it come in through the water. I think that's kind of cool. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the caret, open it up, transform, and I'm going to do position. And I'm also going to do opacity. So now that I've got that, I'm going to come to where I want it to be. And I guess I want it to hold, let's see, I'm going to have it come in at about a little bit before the 4-second mark. So, because it's going to kind of drag across the screen. So at the 4-second mark, I'm going to hit the diamond again, and I'm going to put a keyframe for position and a keyframe for opacity. And now that I'm over here, I'm going to go ahead and hold down the shift key so it moves in a straight line. And I'm going to move this to, I'm going to line it up with the end of the O and go. So there we go. Now I can come back just like before. Now I don't want to mess with position. I could mess with position, but I don't really want to because it'll come in at an angle and that's not going to look good. I'm trying to follow that horizon line, but I do want to mess with opacity. So I'm going to double click on the opacity, and at the earlier point, it's going to be 0. So if I come back here, let's see what we've got. And then it's going to hold, and it'll be there till the end. And even as it fades out, it kind of works because it's white type. So I don't really have to change it one more time. I could, but I'm not going to. So now the other thing that I want to add is I want to add some kind of like lines and things moving across, right? So what I'm going to do is I am going to draw a rectangle. And this rectangle is going to have a white fill and no stroke. And this is kind of a 90s sort of thing, but I'm going to try to, actually I'm going to delete that one, and I'm going to come in here and do one a little thinner. It's going to look like that. And so this one is going to come across from this side for no particular reason. And it's going to end over here. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and make it disappear at the end right here. But I'm going to go ahead and insert a keyframe on here. I'm going to hit position. There's a keyframe there. And then at the end, I'm going to put another, I'm going to click on the diamond and do position. And on this one, I'm going to do a little trick to make it move kind of fast. So I'm going to actually drag it, holding down the shift key so it stays straight. I'm going to drag it kind of far. And so now if we look, it should do this. And that doesn't look very fast, but it works out all right. So it's still moving. That's kind of a nice, I actually don't think I really want it to go fast. I do want it to go slow. But what I want to do is, now that I see it, I want to adjust the opacity of it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to about here. Like after it goes through the sun, I want it to start fading out. So I'm going to come to right here and I'm going to add opacity. And the opacity there is going to be 100%. But I'm not going to have it go all the way off and then disappear. I'm going to have it come to about here. Click on the diamond and adjust that opacity there. So it kind of disappears. So it's now going to look like this. And you know what? I think I am going to I'm going to change the opacity here at the beginning. And I don't want it to be 100%. Let's start off at 70. Okay, let's play it. Now that by itself is pretty boring. So what I'm going to do is I am going to make another shape. There is my shape. And if my point is coming this way, I want this line to also go that way. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to be a little sneaky with it. I'm going to move that over and I'm going to hit my transform. I'm going to adjust the opacity. And then I'm going to come to here. I'm going to hit position. And opacity. And that means for position, I need to have one like a keyframe on position, like maybe, because it's going to fade in. A keyframe here. So I've got this for position is going to be out here. Whoops. So that's going to go here. And for opacity, I'm going to have it at 0. And I'm actually going to move it to about here. So what's going to happen is it should start fading in. It's going backwards. And that's good. That's a really good thing for you guys to see. So what I want to do is on this, make sure this guy's over here. And then here needs to be back here. Whoops. I have to move my playhead back here. And then this has to be back here. So let's see. So you see that line under there? So I'm going to go ahead and adjust the opacity here. And instead of going in the other direction, I'm going to start off with here. My opacity is 100%. And this is also 100%. Okay, that's good. So let's move this, scrub this playhead back. So it's going to show up and be there. Starts off at 22%. Let's see. Whoops. I'll tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and make it go from 0 to about 100 faster. So now I can move this out of the way. And the opacity here is going to be 100%. So that by the time it gets to heat, so now it'll be fully 100%, and then it should go like that. And by the time it gets to here, it is also going to be 100%. So let's take a look at that. It's not great, but it's cool. I mean, that kind of works. So what we want to do is just basically do stuff like that. And you can add as many like little things as you want, or you can add your own things, or you know, there's a bunch of things you can do. In fact, but you don't really want to make it like really cheesy looking. So let me try something here and kind of give you an idea of what I mean. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to show you how to do this. It totally doesn't fit with what I'm doing, but it might fit with what you want to do. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to open up my logo. And what I want to do is I want to make my logo spin. So what I can do is come to about here and hit the under transform, hit rotation, hit the stopwatch next to rotation, boom. That's going to give me a keyframe there. And so now if I move to here and I hit the diamond, it's going to give me a keyframe there. And so what I want to do is if I double click on this keyframe, let me move this out of the way. If I double click on this keyframe, you'll see that it says that positive, like the degrees positive, is clockwise. So however you're sitting, going clockwise. So negative would be counterclockwise. So since I know that it's moving, I'm going to go ahead and go negative. And let's go to 360 is an entire arc, right? So I'm going to go to negative 360. And I'm going to say, okay. So technically, it moves in and it does that. Well, one other thing that I can control on that rotation is if I double click it, you might see that we've got like the number of like revolutions, right? So what if I said, so that's just -1, that was one turnaround. What if I wanted to make it like really crazy and I went to -10 turns? So let's see. That's pretty cheesy. So that's a lot of stuff. And the other thing is, what if, remember I showed you yesterday, what if we go to our animation and I click on the one where it gets flat? Well, what if I say animation keyframe assistant easy ease? So let's see if that looks any better. I mean, it's not because you wouldn't do this, but it may work with whatever you're doing. Yeah, see that slowed a little bit before it stopped. So that's something. I'm not crazy about it, but it's something that you could do. So, and there's a whole bunch more that we're going to be learning about, as I showed you with that police shield that was a puzzle. So we'll be spinning things around and moving them into place. But that's pretty much it. So if you can just make something like this, where you got to fade in, you got to fade out, and you got things moving and multiple layers and type, that would be great. So now let's talk about how you're going to save it and then export it. So I'm going to say save, and it's going to spin for a second. I might have to edit this part out too. And we'll call it Munden Point. I'm just going to put it on my Adobe Animate sample. And we'll call it Munden Point. And so I'm saving it. So now that that is there, by the way, and this is huge, unlike Photoshop, After Effects is more like InDesign. So for example, yeah, I brought this movie in and clicked and dragged it into here, and now the movie's there, but the movie's not really there. So for example, this is the folder where I got that movie. That's where it was, and I dragged and dropped it in. Well, watch what happens if I move that movie out of that folder. So I'm going to come here. Oh, file could not be found. Okay, so now that you've finished the video, you want to see how to export it and how to copy it up to me. Well, one of the problems that we're going to have is that they're going to be big. The files are going to be large. So if we were in class, it wouldn't be a problem. We could use WeTransfer, and we probably will still have to use WeTransfer.com to get stuff back to each other or get stuff back to me. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to set it up, and I need you guys to follow along pretty closely. And don't forget, this is YouTube. You can rewind it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go File, Export, Add to Render Queue. Now watch the bottom of the screen when I hit Add to Render Queue. So it changes, and I do have a video here from earlier, and this I'm just going to delete it. You won't have that, hopefully. So now I've got it, and the newest one is always on the bottom. So we've got 3 hyperlinks down here. The first one is the render settings. So if we click on it, and I guess you could just click on the caret here, but it's really hard to work in that format. So click on the hyperlink. That's why they put it there. And you'll see this window, render settings. Best quality, full resolution is going to give us a multi-gigabyte file because it's for broadcast quality. This is the real thing. So we're going to have to do it in a draft, and I'm going to make the resolution a quarter. You should understand that at the end of this particular process, what you're going to be sending me is pretty low res. That's fine. I can live with that, but we just have to make sure that we can get it through the electronic delivery. It's not going to affect your actual file. Your actual file will stay the same size. So anyways, I've got this, and I'm going to say the draft and the quarter resolution, all that's fine. So we're basically done with this window. So I can say OK. The next thing that we have to do is we have to hit lossless on the output module. Now, one of the things that you're going to have to do here, this gets a little tricky. The first one is easy. The second one, it's a little more complicated. So the format is going to be QuickTime. That's no problem. The render action, none, no problem. What we want to do is we want to hit Format Options. And when we click on Format Options, we need to choose a different video codec. And in this case, we're going to use the DV25 NTSC. I'll explain all that later, but for this project, that's what you need to use. That's going to give us an acceptable file. So I'm going to say OK, and then we can also click on Resize, and you'll see that it's rendering at 480 by 270, but it's going to resize it 400%. So we don't want to do that. So we're going to keep it really small. So all I have to do is mirror these numbers. So 480 by 270. And depending on what your settings are, it might be 360 by something. Just mirror them so that they're the same. And the resize quality will make it high. And then you'll have a triangle down here that says settings mismatch. It's going to automatically fix it. So we're going to say OK. Now, if you say OK, the next thing you go to is the output, where you want to put it. So you have to click on that hyperlink. You can tell it what you want to call it. I'm going to call it Troxel Final Munden Point.mov for QuickTime Movie. and I'm going to say save. Now, since I already have a file there, it's going to say, hey, do you want to replace it? Yes. So I'm going to replace it. And if I sit back and do nothing now, nothing is going to happen because I have to hit the render button over here in the corner. So I'm going to hit render. And depending on the size of your file, the speed of your computer, the speed of your internet connection, if you're using the Windows Virtual Desktop, it could take a few seconds, it could take 30 seconds, it just depends. This progress bar lets you know how it's doing. So even on my computer, it's going to take about 30 seconds to render that. So that sound lets you know it's done. And I'm going to come over here, and it's 100 megabytes. Probably going to be too big for Schoology. And if it is, I'll show you how you're going to send it to me. So there we go. It's really low quality, but that's not bad. I mean, we can work with that. So once you have that done, then you can try to upload it through Schoology. If it's more than, I'm thinking that's going to be too big. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go to this website. And I'll show it to you. It's called WeTransfer.com. We've used it before. This is how I got you your files at the end of the year last year. So what you'll do is you'll just drag and drop it. And this should work I'm sorry, I didn't say okay. I didn't accept their terms of use. I agree. I accept. So it's going to let you add your files. This should work on even your Windows Virtual Desktop or whatever. Hey, that's a terrible place for that picture to freeze. Looks like she has fangs. So all I have to do is drag and drop it right here. Put in my email, which is leetroxel2@gmail.com, because the school email doesn't like the WeTransfer. And then you put in your email address, and then you can put in a message or whatever. And then once there's a message in there in your email, you just hit the transfer button and it will come to me. So that's all there is to it. WeTransfer.com. And so that will work. So basically, I want you to follow through this video, try to do something. So that's pretty much it. So if you can have the movie emailed to me by the end of class today, that would be great. If it takes you a little longer, that's fine too. So that's all. And if there's anything that you missed, just rewind it. And worst case scenario, if you have too much trouble exporting the video, you can always use your phone, take them, play it on your screen and hold your phone up and let it, record a movie and then text me that, just so that I can see that you did the work. But we definitely have to have something in today. All right. So good luck. I hope you do some creative stuff, and I hope you use your own files. But again, there will be an assignment with all the files to download. So thanks, and I'll see you tomorrow.